This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider, presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my old pal Evan Grant. I am out in Arizona on a boondoggle with my wife, the lovely realtor. Evan is in New York, covering the Rangers and Yankees. So, Evan, have you had a good time, first of all, in New York?
Yeah. I got to New York yesterday, and I was on Monday, and I was chasing a couple things with the Rangers. I needed to get some updates on Chris Martin, so I kind of got locked in my hotel room for a little while. But I did go down to Chinatown to have some of my favorite Chinese food at the underground Hop Key that I know is like part opium den in the back and Chinese food in the front. But it was a fantastic time, and I was very proud. I navigated all my different subway trains deftly, and then I came back and my wife is coming up. Gina's coming up late tonight, and wanted to make sure that she had all the bubbly water in the hotel room that she needed. So I went and stopped and bought a 12-pack of Topo Chico for her and lugged it back 5 blocks because, that's how New Yorkers go. That's how we roll here in New York. And so I got my workout in too. I'm very proud of that.
Wow, that's the Evan Grant workout. It's kind of like the Johnny LaRue workout that John Candy used to do.
Well, it's that and 10,000 steps around the buffet.
Well, there you go. You're set. You're ready to go. Your heart's good for another 5-10 minutes.
Exactly.
So that's good. That's good.
But Kevin, you worked once upon a time. You worked, like right now. You're on vacation and everything. I know you got a tea time. And
this is how I do vacation. I come on this podcast.
But you did work once upon a time. And last week you went to a women's basketball game.
I did. On Friday, I went to the Wings opener against the Lynx, and that was the debut, of course, of Paige Bueckers. It didn't go great. She only scored 10 points, 7 rebounds, a couple of assists, and a loss. The most notable thing was they hung with the Lynx through about 3 quarters. The Lynx, of course, were in the WNBA finals last year. And so that was good. Then they kind of fell apart in the fourth. They still need to get things worked out a little bit in the chemistry. But Paige Bueckers is a really nice player. You can just tell that she's very composed for a rookie. Of course, she played 4 years at UConn. It's a great program, so she ought to be composed coming out. Now, it's not the same thing as Cooper Flagg coming out, as an 18-year-old kid. She's an adult, and she's going to be a really good player, really good for them. The Wings will be better this year than they were last year, which, kind of goes without saying when you were 9-31, and that's how you got to draft her in the first place. That means you were probably pretty terrible. So I think this will be a much improved team. It's just going to take a little while to get all the kinks worked out, apparently. But, it was good.
All right, I want to get into your impressions of what it was like being at a Wings game very quickly. But also, before we do this, let's make sure we know who all are we going to be talking to and what are we going to be talking about this week?
We got a lot of stuff going on these days. We're going to have on Leah Assimakopoulos to talk about the Stars in the Western Conference Finals against the Oilers starting Wednesday. Will be the Stars' third Western Conference Finals in a row. So that's pretty impressive. Pete DeBoer's kind of, piling it up a little bit. He just needs to get past it. And then we're going to have Brad Townsend on to talk about not only Scottie Scheffler's PGA win last weekend, which is his third major, and I think that puts him in a category before 29 with, Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus. Pretty good category. And he's also going to talk about Cooper Flagg and his impressions of what the Mavericks are doing, and maybe a little comment or two about the training staff or the former training staff of the Mavericks. And then you're going to talk about the Rangers a little bit. So we got a lot of stuff on this podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think.
I am. So before we get into this, I think that people need a little bit of refresher on what a WNBA experience is like. So what was it like? Because I think there are people who are going to be more interested in going to games this year.
That's at College Park Center, of course, out in Arlington. This is the last year they're going to play over there. Then they're going to move over to Dallas, and I think that'll be good. Not that that's not a good experience there at College Park Center on the UTA campus. It is. It's nice, but they need to be in Dallas and trying to cultivate that crowd, because I'm going to tell you something. They're announcing those crowds as sellouts, and they're not sellouts. The place was about half full, which was really surprising to me. First of all, to see that, you would have thought they would have had a big crowd. It's a loud crowd, I'll give it that. It seemed to have an impact on my equipment anyway. My Otter recording device stopped working after the interviews, and it came back on and displayed what I had recorded immediately after I had filed my column. So that was a little problematic. But
that's when you're at your best, like just recreating quotes out of the blue.
Just winging it. Yeah, that's so
making them up.
Winging it with the wings. So anyway, I am intrigued by the WNBA from the standpoint that we're getting more and better athletic players as we go along here, and that's what Paige Bueckers represents to me. She's really under control when she plays, and just has such great form, and she's smart, and she knows what she's doing. It's all really good. There are aspects of it now, and you can see this in like this whole Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark fiasco, where it's a hard foul and it turns into something else. And I think in some ways in the WNBA, some of this stuff is just a product of not being able to execute a play, or even just something as a hard foul without it becoming a major catastrophe of some kind. It just shouldn't come to the things that it's coming to at some point. And in its own way, it's attracting attention to the league, but for really bad reasons. No one wants to see all that happen. What's come of all of that? Just it unleashes all the the worst aspects of our society, and why we're paying attention to these people who are making these comments. I'm not really sure. That kind of stuff is out there all the time, but from a purely basketball standpoint, I think it's getting better all the time in the WNBA, and that's obviously a good thing, and that's going to be a good thing for the Wings in particular. So
you're not going to go there and see a bunch of dunks, but I mean, for me, I feel like the little amount of women's basketball that I do watch at tournament time and highlights, there certainly with Caitlin Clark, there's been an influx of really good long range shooters in the WNBA. And listen, I think there's been some great ball movement, and for me, I've always kind of thought this, like, the NBA moves a little bit too fast and out of control for me to kind of follow sometimes. I do like the speed of the women's game a little bit more, because it's not quite as up tempo, and I feel like I can just follow it more. But that's because I guess my brain moves slow.
Well, that's why you cover baseball slower. Well, they're trying to push the tempo
for
the Wings.
Sport, Kevin. Thinking man sport.
Mm-hmm. You're thinking about stuff other than baseball when you're out there. The Paige Bueckers is really going to up the tempo, though, for them. That's what they want to do. They want to move, and that's how they were staying with the Lynx for 3 quarters. They were doing that. So we'll see how they go from here. Speaking of going from here, let's move over now and talk about some other things, and we'll start with Leah and talking about the Stars. All right, we're being joined now by Leah Assimakopoulos. Leah, we appreciate you coming on and talking about the Stars. They are starting up Wednesday in the Western Conference Finals against the Edmonton Oilers. This is their 3rd consecutive conference finals in a row. If it's 3rd consecutive, it would be in a row. I'm being a little redundant, but that's not the first time. So I guess that's going to be my first question, Leah. Do they break through here? Do they go to the finals? Do they beat the Oilers? I haven't made my official pick yet, so I'm looking for a little help.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the best chance they've had in the last 3 years. I mean, 2 years ago when they made it, it felt like they were kind of a bit of a Cinderella team going that far against Vegas, and Vegas was a far better team than they were. And last year, they just went through such a gauntlet in the first 2 rounds and were kind of beaten down a little bit heading into that Edmonton series. And not that their first 2 rounds this year weren't difficult, but it feels like they're kind of getting better as the playoffs go on and they're getting healthier. So I think that, this is the best chance they've had. Obviously, it's still a tough series. I picked them to win in 7. So, a game 7 is a toss-up at that point.
All right, let's go back here because I want to brag on my hockey prediction skills a little bit here. I said in the first round against the Colorado, they'd win in 7. They won in 7. I said against in the second round against the Jets, I said they'd win in 6. They won in 6. So
impressive.
Did you have, what did you have against the Jets?
I actually had the exact same 2 picks.
Oh, wow. I may have copied you, Leah. I'm not sure. Leah makes the mistake of sending out her predictions in a little email chain. It goes to everybody, and that way you get to see hers first. And so I may have peeked at hers a little bit before I made my pick.
That's okay.
I appreciate you being nice about it. So Leah, we've watched the Stars now through 2 rounds in development. Of course, Mikko Rantanen was the star of the first series against Colorado, without question. Not as much here in the second round against the Jets. What do you expect to see to develop here in the third round? Is there something that you feel like that will probably evolve and the Stars will show something else here in the third round that will get them to the finals?
Yeah, I think in a long playoff run, you kind of need different players to step up at different times. And, Mikko Rantanen got them through the first round, got them through the early parts of this past round. And then it was probably Jake Ottinger who really got them through the last part. And the players that I'm really looking at are some of the ones that we've kind of seen nothing from, at least on the score sheet, like Matt Duchene, Jason Robertson, Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin. Ben and Seguin did a little more earlier in the playoffs, but the 3 of them, they're aligned and they've been really quiet here. The 3 kind of veteran forwards. And in that last game 6, we really saw them get some great opportunities, and they've just been a little snake bitten here in the last couple of games. It feels like they're close. And that's just what the Stars need. I mean, they need different contributors, and Mikko Rantanen can't do it every night, and Jake Ottinger can't do it every night. So, Robertson and Duchene had 30-plus goals in the regular season, and neither have scored in the playoffs, which you could look at that as a negative, or you could look at that as a positive, as they've gotten through 2 rounds without either of those guys being big contributors, and now they kind of have a chance to break through. So I think they're going to need some new contributions from different people.
Yeah, it's nice to have Jason Robertson in your pocket, isn't it? I mean, and we've seen this before from him, where he has played well during the regular season and then kind of stalled a little bit in the playoffs, and it was not as much of a factor. You wonder sometimes when Mikko comes in and plays so well, right? And maybe, they even start to kind of pull back a little bit because of that, although, they're not on the ice at the same time. So what about a guy like Miro Heiskanen and his return and what that difference that'll make for them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a game changer for them. I think that they kind of universally will say that Miro's their best player, or at least their best defenseman, and one of the best defensemen in the league. And I mean, he's only played 3 games, and in 2 of those games, he played less than 20 minutes, which is kind of unheard of for him. But you could just kind of feel his impact. He's, just a reliable defensive defenseman, also brings some offensive contributions, also plays on the power play, just does it all for them. And in the last game, in game 6, he played 23 minutes, which was the closest he's been to kind of his normal production. And he played up to 28 minutes, or an average of 28 minutes in the playoffs last year. So he's still not quite there, but getting pretty close. And the Stars have been using an extra defenseman the last couple games to limit his minutes. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go back to a normal 12-6 lineup now. He's getting close. And, when you're playing players like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl for Edmonton, you need a reliable defenseman like Miro.
Yeah, no question about it. Leah, Pete DeBoer's coaching record is pretty phenomenal about what he does with teams and does with them fast. It's not like there's a break-in period with his team where he seems to have to get to know them. And really, they take off. They don't finish quite as well as they start. Is that just? It seems to me the greater talent is being able to get someplace and make a team good right away.
Yeah.
That it is. There's a little bit of a crapshoot, when you're in the playoffs, right? Things
Mm-hmm.
happen. It's fluky, right? There's more. There's a smaller sample size there in the playoffs, and so things that happen during the regular season, it's drawn out over an 82 game schedule, and so that's when you're really showing, in my mind, what kind of team you are. When you get into the playoffs, well, then that's where luck starts to factor in a little bit too. Do you think that Pete DeBoer in any way looks at that and feels any extra pressure? Is he the kind of guy that would feel that, or do you think that he knows that eventually this is all just going to play out like it should?
I mean, I think he feels a lot of pressure. I think I think he's coached for all these years, and he's still trying to win the Stanley Cup, and he's gotten so close so many times. So, but I think his resume does speak for itself. I mean, he's made so many conference finals, he's gotten so close all these times, and as you said, he's come in here and taken this team to the conference finals 3 straight years. That's tough to do in a new place, and they have a lot of appreciation for that. So I think there's definitely pressure because now the expectation is essentially that they get to the conference finals. If they didn't do that this year, it almost felt like the season was a disappointment, and there were a lot of times where it felt like they wouldn't, and they lose 7 games at the end of the regular season. People were questioning him and questioning his future in Dallas. Obviously that's all gone out the window now, but eventually they're going to have to get over this conference finals hump. And when you have a team like this and all this skill, it feels like they need to do that sooner rather than later. The window's open now.
Yeah, it's definitely open now, and it is different. It's like you said before. There was a little bit of a luck involved, and from their standpoint, but now because of the talent that Jim Nill has assembled on that team, I don't want to say that Stars fans would be they're not going to call for Pete's head or anything like that. Not when you're getting to the conference finals. That doesn't happen. Doesn't happen in this market. I'll say that. It might happen in New York if you get there and you don't win it all. But it'll be interesting to me to see when is the tipping point for this Stars fan base, which is a very loyal fan base. When you've got a team this good, added such a great player at the trade deadline, and have a coach who's won it all. It's 3 years in a row you've made the conference finals. It does feel like this is close to a tipping point, doesn't it?
I think so. I mean, I remember just the feeling last year. They go through an entire season and they lose in the exact same game that they lost the year before, and obviously it was a different circumstances. And I mean, Pete DeBoer said he was more disappointed because they felt like they were better than Edmonton last year, and they just couldn't score on the power play, couldn't contain their best players, things that they just could not take care of. But it feels like kind of a similar situation this year. I mean, I don't know if the Stars are better than Edmonton. I'm not sure. I mean, we're going to see how that plays out over the next few weeks. But if they, lose in 6 games again to the Oilers, I think there definitely is going to be a feeling of disappointment and frustration. And, Jim Nill goes out and makes the biggest move at the trade deadline to get an absolute superstar. And even that can't do enough. They're healthy right now. You can't use injuries as an excuse. So, I think this is kind of that they need to show that everything they did in the regular season to get to this point was all worth something.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they obviously need to get to the finals. There's no question about that. I would classify it as a disappointment if they got to the conference finals and didn't get to the finals, considering where they've been the last 2 years and with everything they've done and how well they've played. And look, you could make the case that both Colorado and Winnipeg were 2 of the obviously when you get to this point, everybody's one of the best teams in the league. But these are prohibitive favorites, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you beat those, and you beat the Jets in 6 games,
Right.
So I do think that this will be a big time for Jake Ottinger if he really plays well, which he's capable of doing that. He doesn't always play great, but he is always capable of having a great game, which it makes him interesting to me. It's kind of like which Jake Ottinger are you going to get here but he has played really well in these playoffs. So I think that could be a factor here. Leah, we appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Is there anything else that you need to tell us about the Stars before we get out?
No, it should be a fun series.
Well, I know it's been fun for you, and we appreciate you doing this for us as well, and also covering it for the Dallas Morning News. It means a lot to our readers. I know that. All right. Now joining us, Brad Townsend, to talk about the multiplicity of things that Brad can talk about. He is our resident golf expert / basketball expert / everything else that he writes about. So Brad was writing about Scottie Scheffler winning the PGA over the weekend. So Brad, did you have him in your? First of all, let me ask you this: did you have plans for the weekend before Scottie did that?
No, well, anytime Scottie is playing in a major or frankly any tournament, the plans include at least watching what he's doing. And obviously for us as a newspaper, if he's going to win a major, certainly we need to try to localize that as much as possible. And, he's also coming off his last performance before the PGA was winning by 8 shots at the Byron Nelson. So he's very, very top of mind for any golf fan in Dallas-Fort Worth.
Put that win in perspective for us, Brad. What did that mean?
First of all, it silenced any notion that his career had plateaued in any respect. I think when he had the injury on Christmas Day, the freak injury where he cut his hand while making ravioli with a wine glass of all things, that reminded everybody that Scottie's just a regular guy like us. He does dumb things, he's probably not a great cook. Maybe he's probably not even a good handyman, but that was certainly a setback for him. It was basically 2 months where he couldn't practice very much. But the biggest thing, I think it announced to the world that he is clearly the most dominant golfer out there. Yes, Rory McIlroy won the Masters. Yes, it was historic. Became the 6th person to finish the career Grand Slam. But Rory made a mess of it on Sunday. Scottie started to make a mess of it this Sunday, but you saw how he was able to get the wheels back on. And I think that's really what separates him from anybody else. As he pointed out, he leans on his mental abilities as much as anything else. And, he ate a quick sandwich at the turn, and next thing you know, all his shots stopped going to the left.
Yeah, the thing about him that's I think makes him so good and makes up for the fact that those crazy dancing feet of his is just the mental stability. He's just so calm. He doesn't let stuff rattle him too much. He doesn't let emotions get to him too much. I've always thought Jordan Spieth, that's what works at him, is just he can't keep his mind quiet. He's just, there's so much going on there with Jordan, and that's really working against him now. I was struck by that quote. I don't know if you were when Jordan was talking about Scottie and playing with him, and said, I used to dominate him, and now it's the other way around. And it was a sad quote to read, because you for someone as young as Jordan, that to talk like that, it sounded like he was an old man, and he's not an old man. He's still got a lot of golf out in front of him, Yeah. So, but I want to ask you about from Scottie, from the standpoint that he, as I noted earlier, he's joined a group now with Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus, winning 3 majors before the age of 29. And I don't know that I would put him in a league of dominance like those two yet. We haven't seen that. I don't know that, when Tiger played, it just felt like, oh my gosh, everybody else is just playing for second now.
Right.
But he is certainly closer to that group than anybody else we've seen in a long time, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely the most dominant golfer since Tiger's really heyday in the early to mid to that first decade of the 2000s. one of the interesting things, on the telecast, CBS, they pointed out, well, he's played 140 events. He's won basically 10% of them. Well, yes and no. Yeah, he has done those, but guess what? His 15 wins, so he's played 140 events. His 15 wins have come in his last 70. So he's really, in this stretch, he's winning 21% of his tournaments.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And and I don't see any sign that he's going to be slowing down. He turns 29. To me, he's just entering his prime. And if you're a competitor of his, one of the things that's got to be pretty unnerving is how he's improved his putting. 2 years ago, he was 162nd in strokes gained through putting. Last year he was 77th. He made a stride forward, and this year he's 22nd.
Wow.
And that was the one knock on him, that his putting could be inconsistent. He wasn't a bad putter. Even his misses were agonizingly close. But if this guy figures it out putting wise, he's going to be virtually impossible to beat.
Yeah, that's really something. And to think about that, you could improve your game that much, or one aspect of your game that much. That's remarkable, that kind of stat. What's the limit for him now? If he's gonna continue to play like this and he doesn't have any major injuries, there's nothing comes up. Is he gonna win 50, 60, tournaments in his career?
That's really tough to envision. You mentioned Tiger and Jack. The difference there is that they did it over a long period of time. It remains to be seen if Scottie's going to be able to do that. He's, life catches up to you. I think we saw, obviously, in Tiger's case, life caught up with him in a way that I don't think is ever going to happen to Scottie.
Let's hope not.
And Scottie, here a year ago, his biggest quote unquote flaw was getting arrested through no fault of his own. And if anything else, that just shined a light on his humanity. I talked to Randy Smith, his longtime, since age 7 instructor, and he said, you don't have to go any further than that PGA Championship to learn who Scottie Scheffler is. And I think the public, for the national public, has probably considered him a little boring. That, if you ask Scottie, he's going to say, I wish that had never happened. But I think that what happened at the PGA put it's a country club sport, but it gave him a little street cred, I guess you might say, to see him, a mugshot of him. But the grace is with which he handled it. He goes to the course that day, gets out of jail, shoots a 4 under, I believe 4 or 5 under, answered all the questions afterward very calmly, did not blame anybody. And just the way he handled that said a lot about him. It said a lot about his upbringing. And he's got a pretty tight, comfortable cocoon. Randy Smith is his coach. Randy's son, Blake, is his manager. His parents and his 3 sisters, he's obviously very close to them. His wife, Meredith, they've known they were sweethearts in high school. And he even remarked after winning the PGA how wonderful his life is off the course. And, over the years, you do watch golfers and you wonder what's going to happen once they start having kids. Jordan Spieth has 2, and he has another one on the way, and injuries. I guess that's the one unknown right now, is if Scottie, every golfer gets injuries of some kind. I guess that's the one unknown. But I could see him prolonging this a good 5-7 years, and then we'll see going forward. But he's already 3rd all time in money won. That's unbelievable. Over $80 million.
Yeah, but
you
the
wonder.
value of the dollar is less than ever, Brad. So I mean,
Well, okay, I guess today's 80 million is worth, I don't know,
I will say this:
$12.
Scotty may be boring, but there is a theory online since he played the first round of the PGA Championship in an orange polo, right? I think he was wearing orange, which
Right,
matched the color of the jumpsuit from last year. That
right.
maybe that was a subtle nod to that whole incident. I don't
Could
know,
be.
but it's a good theory online because we all love a good conspiracy theory.
He does have a wicked, a wickedly dry sense of humor. It would not surprise me at all if that was that. For instance, at the Masters dinner, that the defending champion host, one of his meals was ravioli. So, poking fun at himself.
I hope he
And
didn't
that's
make that ravioli.
Well, yeah, I think it was one of the fine chefs at Augusta National probably did that, but I think his, and you talk to people like Jordan Spieth and guys who play with him all the time in Dallas, and they remark that they see a different side of Scotty. He's a real trash talker when they're out playing for money at Dallas National and some of the other courses around Dallas.
Well, you got to have
Late
that.
And I
70s,
think
right?
you also saw that come out on Sunday. It was very, he's really not usually demonstrative, but for him to take off his cap and throw it down like he was spiking a football, that was pretty telling too.
There is also a theory about that was an imitation of Josh Spores spiking his glove from the 2023 World Series because he's a Rangers fan. So who knows? He does run in that Highland Park circle with another Highland Park graduate who runs a club around here.
Yeah, this is true. And the one of the things about Scotty's career that I guess will be kind of a footnote is that when he won his first event uh, in Phoenix, it was overshadowed by that day's Super Bowl, which I believe was won by another Highland Park guy, Matthew Stafford. And so that's always going to be kind of a footnote of Scotty's career that, his real big run here started and literally in the same city as that Super Bowl.
We
All
all know
right.
Scots run the world. Go ahead, Kevin. What we got on Cooper Flagg and Mavs Mania?
Well, we're going to talk to Brad about that because I was intrigued by something Brad said to me, and maybe he even wrote this, talking about Cooper Flagg, and Brad's a noted basketball expert, and he said that well, Brad, you was telling me what you said about Cooper Flagg and coming out of this draft and what you compared him to.
Well, I think he's the best two-way prospect since LeBron. Now, you immediately brought up Wemby, and I agree that Wemby has a higher ceiling, but I'm not really convinced that Wemby is going to be able to stay healthy. I think that's a big question mark. I think that's a question mark of a lot of guys that have his frame and his height. You look at Cooper Flagg. I guess he measured it closer to 6'8" at the combine. I thought he was 6'9", but guess what? I mean, he actually could still be growing. And you look at his physique; he's not a string bean like Wemby. And you only had to watch a couple of Duke games last year to see what an all-around talent he is, and the ferocity. I mean, his ability to channel his competitiveness is really striking. So I'm not saying that Wemby doesn't care, but Cooper Flagg plays with more fire.
I was really struck by some quotes from Mike Krzyzewski about him. And of course, he wasn't his coach anymore, well, I mean, he hasn't been the coach now for 3 years, but he's obviously still very close to the program and he's clearly a huge fan of Flagg and talked about his length. Of course, he has like a 7-foot wingspan, and you're right, he's not quite as tall as we thought he was. No one is, by the way. Ask anybody how tall they are, and they all say they're taller than they really are. But he Yeah, he plays with such a great motor, and I, of course, everything about him seems to suggest this is exactly the guy that the Mavericks would have wanted, right? I mean, everybody wants him because he's just a great player, but he certainly fits the style that they're trying to play now, or what they say they're trying to be. They're trying to be a defensive team, and and it probably at this point in his career, he's more accomplished as a defensive player than he is an offensive player. And not that he wasn't good offensively. He shot 38% from the 3-point range last year. But he is still just a phenomenal prospect from the standpoint of he's still 18. And that is the thing, Brad, just blows me away about this. And for the Mavericks, sheer luck is that you traded away a generational player who's 26 years old, and you get the potential of another generational player who's 8 years younger than Luka. 8 years younger. That's just unbelievable to me that they have stumbled into this. But before, Brad, you answer on any of that, Evan Grant has raised his hand.
Okay. Well, I have a question that I think leads into whatever you're going to answer on this, but Brad, I do need to ask you this. It has driven me crazy since this has taken place. The number of conspiracy theorists online and on local radio who said, "Oh, this is fixed. It's rigged. It's this. It's that." I'm just wondering, how have you responded to that? Because I know it's got to drive you to the ends of the earth in terms of craziness.
I've tried not to respond to that. I mean, it's as crazy as this notion of the Mavericks moving to Las Vegas. Yeah, I did tweet that to that.
Yeah, you're right.
Like it's zilch, nada. Neither one of those things is reality. The Mavericks are not moving to Las Vegas, and the draft lottery was not rigged. I applaud the NBA for making it really as transparent as it can be. I clearly understand why in 1985, when they had they were rolling the it was like a church raffle or something.
Yeah,
it had a little tumbler with a big old tumbler and big old envelopes in there that might have, maybe got stuck together or had something on there that could have indicated, hey, let's draw the Knicks first. It's on video. Just watch it. There's just no way that you could fix something that's that ornate, where it comes down to which 4 balls come out and which 4 or in which order. I mean, just watch it.
It doesn't matter.
It's not like there's a UFO sighting out here, right? Nobody can watch that. Nobody can watch that video and go, "Oh, this is rigged."
I just turned on the radio as I was going to the park one day, and there was a segment on this where they were rattling off their conspiracy theories, and I was like, "This is why I don't listen to sports radio."
Well, it's all silly because, as I pointed out right after that, when they got the pick, what would be more important to the NBA than the Knicks being good? And the Knicks were terrible for 20 years, and they let Mark Cuban fix them. Right. If you're going to do that kind of thing, you take care of the organization you have to take care of. The luckiest team in the lottery is San Antonio historically, and they moved up again. They moved up 6 spots, to the second pick. So what would the NBA care whether San Antonio was good or not? That's not a major market. So, it's been a great organization, and Greg Popovich, who's just now retired, is done an unbelievable job. Is probably the best coach in the history of the NBA. But that doesn't mean the NBA should care about San Antonio, and yet it's the luckiest one. So, but no one wants to look at those things. We always look at the fact that Luka just left, and this is the way for to fix them. And by Luka going to the Lakers, that's fixing the Lakers, the league, right behind that whole thing. Because people just can't believe that Nico would just do something like that. And I think what we're finding out now is that, he can do things like this because that's kind of the nut that he is a little bit. And I wanted to bring up before I forget about it. Casey Smith, the former, what was Casey's official title, Brad? It was more than an athletic trainer.
I believe it was director, vice president of player health and safety.
Yeah, which means basically that he was the head athletic trainer, and then they had people working underneath him that did everything too.
Right.
But he was the guy in charge, and he got crosswise with Nico, and he was fired, and then he ended up with the Knicks. And before he left, he had twice been recognized. He and his staff had twice been recognized as the best in the business. Right.
Right. 21 and 22. Yeah.
Yeah, and just now the Knicks, where Casey Smith works now, were recognized as having the top medical training staff in the league.
Yeah, I'd say that's not a coincidence. And Heather Mao, who was with the Mavs, is with him. Casey knows what he's doing. He's universally respected around the NBA. He was Team USA's trainer in 2 Olympics, And frankly, Deion Calhoun is highly regarded too. So I think it's unfortunate that he became a fall guy in this and got dismissed. But, I think they've got bigger issues than Deion Calhoun for sure.
Yeah.
But there is definitely a dysfunctional group last year when you had 3 occasions of players coming back and either immediately going back onto the injury list. I don't think these guys were being evaluated well enough.
Yeah, there seemed to be not everyone was on the same page on that medical training staff, and that was an issue. And I don't think that fans normally even care about that kind of thing. But I think the reason why it's important in this aspect is that it shows the level of dysfunction in the organization as a whole, led by Nico Harrison and his and basically what it seems like it was just a personality difference. He didn't like Casey Smith, because Casey was good friends with Luka, and Casey wouldn't do some of the things they asked him to do, and that became a big mess. And it showed a side of Nico that the rest of us on the outside were not really aware of, or at least I wasn't. And I think it kind of gives fans an idea of what it's like inside the organization now, which is still a very disconcerting and still startling development and revelation over the last 6 months. It's just kind of hard to believe that everything has happened the way it has, even now. And as you and I talked about, Brad, and you covered the Mavericks, and you've been around the Mavericks forever. The 2 most shocking developments of this organization's history have happened in the last 4 months. A, trading Luka Doncic, and then B, getting the first pick in the line when they've never had any luck at all in the lottery. Never, never moved up once in the lottery, and they go from 11 to 1. A 1.8% chance to get that. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a franchise that had Roy Tarpley. There was a lot of shocking moments just out of Roy Tarpley.
There were a lot of shocking developments.
But these 2 clearly.
I think I remember one.
The Jason Kidd trade was also shocking, but these 2 things just blew those out of the water.
I believe I remember once having to go to Roy Tarpley's.
We have a little thing here. This is going to be your favorite part. Little segment we're introducing called "Better Get to Know a SportsDay Staffer," and it's important since you've only been here for 30 years that people finally get to know who you are a little bit. So, 5
this is coming from you, that's going to be great, I'm sure.
5 quick questions, quick answers off the top of your head. Some of these may have been borrowed from our good friend Stephen Colbert and the Colbert Questionnaire. You ready?
All right.
The best sandwich.
He sounds really excited.
Italian.
It's the best assignment you've ever had.
NBA bubble.
Interesting answer. What would be your walk-up song?
Got to be something with AC/DC.
Wow, AC/DC. So I would not have picked Brett for AC/DC.
Well, I mean, you said rapid fire. I'm trying to think of the emotion.
Describe your Twitter existence in 5 words.
Do what? I missed that one.
Describe your Twitter existence in 5 words.
I'll do it in 2. Love, hate.
The best interview of all time that you've ever had.
Well, the best experience, it wasn't really an interview. It was really more of an honor. It's the 4 hours that I spent at Children's Health Hospital shadowing Dirk Nowitzki as he visited. He did his annual Christmas uh, visit to kids. That's nothing will ever top that in terms of experience with a high profile athlete. Um, that's certainly at the top. That was both difficult and heartwarming, and just to see Dirk and those kids and the parents, it's going to sit with me forever.
Beautiful. You made it through that.
Well, didn't really get much help from Kevin over there. I thought he would.
Well, this is about you.
Me.
It's not about Kevin.
Well, I thought Kevin would help me out there a little bit, but
you don't. I
thought that was a great answer, and that was a great answer about that children's hospital. That was a wonderful story, by the way. And Brad Townsend was got that story when no one else did, because Dirk had been doing that for a number of years and had never wanted any publicity. And that's one of the things that you should know. We already know this about Dirk, but lots of athletes do things, and then their publicists or their agents / go out and tell everybody all about it so we can write about how wonderful they are. Dirk never wanted anybody to notice that he was doing this. It was something he always did surreptitiously, and it was a wonderful story. So, yeah, good call on that one, Brad.
Thank you.
All right, Brad, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
I pretty much enjoyed it. Thanks.
Brad, there goes Brad Townsend, the Scottie Scheffler of Sports Day. All right, so Evan, the Rangers are coming off a series with the Astros, which to me might have been the most frustrating series of this very frustrating season so far. When you look at it from the standpoint that they were probably 4 innings away from sweeping a 4-game series against the Astros, which would have made an unbelievable statement in the AL West. And I don't. You can always say, well, yeah, there's always one inning that screws up something. But when you get starting pitching like they got in that series, and you got some pretty timely hitting in that series as well, and they were playing great defense, there were a lot of things that all were stacked in their favor, except that the bullpen fell apart right when they least needed that to happen.
Yeah, and I think in some ways this is the detritus, or the calcification is probably more proper word, of their offensive struggles from early in the year, because they've had nothing but close games. And so Bruce Bochy has gone to his experienced leverage guys and used them an awful lot. And I think that, in the case of Chris Martin in particular, you're talking about a guy who's going to turn 39 in 2 weeks. Early in the week, he was pitching for a third straight day for the first time in his career, and felt popping noises in his elbow, which should concern anybody, and came out after one pitch. And then they seem to have dodged any kind of catastrophe there, took 3 or 4 days off, came back, pitched an inning successfully, and then was back out there on Sunday to try and close that game out, or take it to the 9th inning, and felt issues in his shoulder. And so I think, if nothing else, and the Rangers seem to be fairly optimistic about this. I will remind everybody, we're recording this on Tuesday morning, and by the time I get to the park and by the time this drops, we may have other news. I won't be surprised if Martin ends up on the IL, but I don't think it'll be terribly serious. But it should serve as a cautionary warning to the Rangers that they've got to back down on the usage of all these real high leverage arms, and either find some other guys in the bullpen they're willing to trust, like Jake Latz or maybe Luis Crivello from the minor leagues, or they're going to have to go out and acquire a reliever here, because there's no way these guys are going to make it through the season with this kind of workload.
Yeah, it is concerning. And as you noted the other day, when you or Sean, I can't remember which one, wrote about, so I guess it was you, that wrote about the options that they have here. And one of the options probably isn't going out and adding a big time reliever, because that would put them, in that dangerous, luxury tax threshold, whatever, apron. What are we calling these things now? Aprons? What is
No,
it?
it's the luxury tax.
Okay.
And listen, on the luxury tax threshold, I know it sounds silly. I wrote this again yesterday on Monday when I talked about David Robertson and that he's probably not an option. And the point now is this, is if you do, after all this time, end up going over the luxury tax by like $1 million, then you wasted your entire winter of planning. And if you were going to go over the luxury tax, you should have gone over then when there was a fuller field to pick from and there were more ways to address your club. If you tick over the thing, it doesn't matter what little bit you pay 50% overage on, but now you're in the same position next year, and so you've defeated your strategy, and you haven't put off any penalties for next year. So that's the issue with going over the luxury tax. Now, I also have concerns. Look, David Robertson is 41. He was a very effective pitcher last year, but he's not pitching. It's going to take some time for him to get up to par. I think the Rangers need to find some internal options that they're willing to at least try out a little bit more. And I think those guys, if the starting rotation can continue to stay healthy, those guys might be the guys that are coming back from the IL, like Kumar Rocker, Cody Bradford, John Gray.
Yeah. What about a guy like Dane Dunning? Has the organization just kind of given up on him, or what's the thought?
I think they feel like Dane Dunning as a reliever is more of a multi-inning guy, and I don't think that they feel like he's a high leverage guy at this point. Dane doesn't have kind of the overwhelming stuff that you would like to think of that a late inning guy would typically have. He doesn't really have what you'd call a dominant out pitch. I think with Rocker, you've got a guy who's got potential of 100-mile-an-hour stuff. With John Gray, you've got a guy who can throw 95 plus. So there's some high octane arms there. And the thing with Bradford is he's not just a multi-inning option, but he's also a left-handed option that could give you some, if you've got a string of lefties coming up.
Yeah, and of course, the problem with the whole thing, and obviously the John Gray thing is very intriguing to me. I felt like after watching him, in the World Series run, when he pitched in relief, it was just phenomenal. I mean, I think he turned the team's fortunes when he came in and pitched so well against the Astros in the ALCS. It's very, I see him as a closer option here in the second half if he comes back and has anything, right?
Well, there was chatter about that going into spring training when they didn't have an experienced closer. And, the Rangers chose to shoot that down because he pitched so well in spring training as a starter right up until he took a ball off his wrist. But certainly that's an option. He's got two really good pitches. That fastball and the slider make him certainly a capable guy that you would be willing to turn to in the 8th or 9th inning.
Yeah,
the one guy who we would like to see in a position to maybe step forward is Mark Church. And, he began the season with the Rangers, but struggled a little bit up here. And I think he's just got to pitch more at AAA.
So what was the deal with Cole Winn? He comes up, pitches pretty well, goes right back down again. He was doing great in the minors. Why didn't he stick?
Well, I suspect that Cole Winn will be back if Chris Martin goes on the IL, and so by the time this airs, this whole conversation may be moot. But Cole threw a couple innings on Friday. The Rangers got into a situation where they wanted to they were going to bring up Kevin Pillar, activate him. And so the only way to get a fresh arm up here to kind of replace Winn would be when they IL'd, who did they put on the IL this weekend? I'm drawing a blank, but they made an IL move. So it allowed them to put, they put Evan Carter on the IL. So when you put a player on the IL, it allows you to bring somebody up who's been down less than 10 days. And so they were able to bring Caleb Bosley back, and he's pitched really well in kind of this long relief, thankless mop-up rule. So and you can't carry more than 13 pitchers, so the out guy becomes Cole Winn. Now, if you place Martin on the IL, you bring Winn back up. He had his 2 days of rest. He's ready to go.
Yeah. That's the thing about all this stuff with the bullpen all of a sudden falling apart was that it overshadowed the fact that Evan Carter's back on the DL or the IL. That's, it's just not looking good, is it?
Well, I mean, I think the good news for the Rangers is that it's not directly a back issue. This is quadriceps. And on its own, you would like to think that this is a 2-week, 3-week kind of deal. But then you take into the fact, is the stress from playing on the artificial turf with his back issue, does that complicate things? Does it lead to any of that? I don't know that anybody with any kind of biomechanical evidence could show that there's a direct correlation, but it's going to raise those kinds of questions, right? And until Evan is able to come up here and play and stay healthy, anytime he's got a back or lower half issue, you're going to wonder, does this somehow relate to the back situation?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to me, the back is pretty central to everything else. When things start to get off a little bit, you don't have to be off very much to kind of set everything else haywire. So
no, I mean,
not
that's
a good
what you run into when you
him.
overcompensate lower half anywhere. Or really, when you overcompensate in any situation, that's when you have flare-ups that go back to a root cause injury.
Yeah, no question about that. So what is at this point, Leody Taveras is in Seattle now, and he's playing there about how he played here. What is the answer in center field until they get
Sam Haggerty here?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. The Haggerty's played pretty well. Is this the kind of situation, Evan, where you're going to see, let's bring a guy up, let's put him out there, see how he does. If he gets hot, we'll leave him out here until he cools off, which is kind of happened with Dustin Harris, and then we'll just move on to the next guy. Is that what's going to happen here?
Well, when you're talking about 24th, 25th, 26th guys, I think that's pretty much general operating procedure. But listen, in a lot of ways, Haggerty kind of came up and played with the Mariners. And so in a lot of ways, you've made a trade with the Mariners. You traded and got Sam Haggerty and sent him Leody Taveras. But I think Sam has a better idea of who he is as a switch hitter, extra outfielder, with the added ability to play some infield. He's got decent speed. He's willing to play small ball. I don't think he's got a great arm. Leody's got a better arm, and Leody's got more power. But I think for what the Rangers are trying to do in terms of manufacture runs when need be, I think that Sam has a better idea of how to operate.
I'm glad you're able to get that out. All right, it's enough about the past. Let's talk about this series coming up here with the Yankees, the Battle of the Boones. So we're seeing Brett Boone going up against his brother Aaron. They seem to have a classic older brother, younger brother kind of relationship. In my brief conversation with him the other day, and then also in other things I've read, he likes to give it to Aaron a little bit. What has been your impression of what this relationship might be?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you were talking about?
I was talking about Brett Boone.
Brett Boone. Oh, it's the Brett Boone report. Listen, I think Brett, I think he can relate to these players. And I think that's the crux of what the Rangers want him to do. I do think in particular, I think on Sunday I wrote about Marcus Semien, and there is a lot of concern about Marcus Semien and where he's at. But I will say this: Brett's a great resource for Marcus. Brett was a second baseman with power ability, who encountered issues in his mid-30s, and ultimately Father Time won with him, as it did with Michael Young and with Ian Kinsler. But I do think that all those guys, and all of them were around the ballpark at some point in time this past week, all of them have something to offer in retrospect about what they encountered as they got older. I will say this. I think Marcus is in great shape. I think he's moving well. I think he's still obviously contributing defensively, but I do think that yeah, part of what the Rangers are hoping for is that Brett and Marcus can kind of develop a real bond that allows Marcus to maybe make whatever changes he needs to make to the core of who he is. Because I think when you get to 34, 35, it's no longer about making small changes and small adjustments. If you're going to continue to succeed, more often than not, you've got to take proactive steps to make bigger changes.
Yeah, the other day I was looking at Baseball Savant and about Marcus, and his range at second is still great, but his bat speed has really regressed.
No, I would disagree with that. His bat speed
Yeah?
was not great last year, and his bat speed, as long as we've had measurements, which really only date to last year, has not been top tier. But what they talk about more is, and actually, I think his bat speed right now is 68.5, and it was 68.3 last year. 0.2 of a mile doesn't really mean one way or another. But I do think what the Rangers talk about more is the ability to flick his hands and the quick twitch. He's not got really fast speed through the zone, but he's got the quick twitch muscles that allow him to really flick a baseball.
Okay, so but he's not flicking a baseball. That is the whole point. That
right. I mean
that,
and I think that and I'm sorry that I'm stumbling over this, but I think the Rangers feel like he has gotten himself caught in between with his pitch setup, that he is a little bit late on the fastball right now and he's too early on the breaking ball. And I think this all comes down to unraveling some stuff and say, all right, maybe we can't cover two different pitches. You've got to focus on one pitch and one pitch only. And if that means you're going to have to start a little bit earlier on the fastball, then maybe you've got to do that, and you try to do a little bit better job of laying off the breaking stuff.
So what's Marcus got left on his contract? 2 years? After this year?
This is his fourth year, so he's got 3 years left after this.
3 years left after this. Yeah. So that could be problematic at some point here with 3 more years left. And it wasn't an extravagant contract. Well, it was for the Rangers, but they've signed worse deals. I would say that, but that could be a problematic if he's not going to start putting something together here pretty fast, because he's not even league average right now at second base.
No, I mean, listen, you go back to and I think this was in the column on Sunday, over the 365 days leading into Sunday, he had a 618 OPS, which was the second lowest of any qualifier, or the fifth lowest of any qualifier in that time. He's not been a good offensive player for a long time. And listen, he didn't really want to talk about it when I approached him about it, but the little bit that he said was very honest, that it hasn't been fun. He knows what the numbers are. It hasn't been fun for him mentally. And I think the first step in all of that is get yourself out of your own head and step back and just focus on what's in front of you instead of trying to change the numbers that are on the scoreboard.
Yeah, because everybody else is, kind of bouncing back a little bit here, right? We've seen Jake Berger make contributions. We've seen Jock Peterson make contributions. We've seen Josh Young going back to what we expect of Josh Young. A little bit of a little Wyatt Langford struggled a little bit, but not much, not more than what you would expect a guy who was as hot as he was before. So really, Marcus is the one guy that hasn't really caught up as much as they would obviously hope he
would. No, he is still struggling just a little bit, and I think that is it's a concern, right? I mean, I think the Rangers, when they signed this contract, they expected that years 6 and 7 of this deal, it would be sketchy as to whether or not he'd be a big time offensive contributor, and that probably there was going to be at least 1 year in their deal where they weren't getting value. I think this is the concern is that there's been real regression a little bit earlier than they had hoped.
Yeah. I will say this, those two deals, I remember when they were made, and of course they signed Marcus first, and then they signed Corey Seager after that. That I thought the Semien deal was really a smart deal. It wasn't, it was extravagant for the Rangers, but not in the great scheme of things. And then, the Corey Seager deal, which was longer and more expensive, it's like, well, that's still a great deal because you're getting a really good player. I would say the interesting thing about that as it has developed is that I wouldn't say Corey was a bargain, but he certainly lived up to every dollar of what they could have wanted from him, right? I mean,
when healthy, but I mean, he has played, he's missed 20% of the team's games over the course of his contract here.
That's true, and that is problematic. But he's also a World Series MVP, and it's hard to argue with that. It goes back to that Aroldis Chapman trade, right? As long as you're going to get something out of it that gets you a flag, then okay.
Oh, 100%. And look, to your point on this, I think the idea of Semien and Seager and signing those guys was to jumpstart this organization's competitive window. And the Rangers didn't have any, I don't think the Rangers had any feel that for the entirety of both of their contracts that they would both be elite level players. But the price that you had to pay to get those guys to help you jumpstart which was, a team that was at the bottom, that's the tax you had to pay. And I think it was a worthwhile tax. But now you do have to deal with the realities of, is Marcus in decline, and what do you do about that going forward?
And so one last question before we get out of here, since we're talking about Seager and Semien, who are obviously the foundation cornerstones of this team. Do the Rangers have to think at some point about moving Seager off a shortstop to keep him healthy?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's not on the table at this point in time. I don't think it would be on the table at any point in time in 2025. I think if the Rangers are going to consider that, that's going to be something that's presented to them as an off-season project. And I think a lot of that also has to do with, what do they get out of first base? Because if you're going to move him somewhere, first base seems to always be the easy spot. And if they've got Jake Berger, who's still a pre-arbitration player, what do they want to do with Jake Berger there? Do they want to trade him and move Seager over there? And are they going to play Josh Smith or Sebastian Walcott at shortstop? But I think right now the Rangers are focused solely on 2025, getting him on the field and trying to squeeze the most out of this team that they think can win a very winnable division that should have won at least 3 out of 4 against Houston. And it should be, right on the heels of the Seattle Mariners at this point in time.
No question about that. Yeah, I'm not suggesting in any shape or fashion that Corey Seager ends up being a first baseman this year or even next year. But I do think probably by 2027, when, as you mentioned, Sebastian Walcott, when he's probably ready at that point.
Sure, I think that's got to be part of the long-term conversation. Yeah, I think it's always been part of the long-term conversation.
Yeah, I just don't know how Seager would react to it. He likes playing shortstop. There's no question about that. And balls that are in his range, he catches them. I think the only thing you would question about him defensively is his range. But he makes all the plays he's supposed to make, which, is always the first thing with me in a shortstop, or anybody actually. I don't want to, it's great if you got great range and you're great, and you're fast and all of that. But if you're not catching all the balls you're supposed to catch, then I'm not interested. I don't want to. Let's not be making errors or screwing up things. And that's what Leody Taveras was to me, a guy you just couldn't match up to the potential that he had.
Correct.
But they seem to like him all right in Seattle so far. So that's good for them. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We covered a lot of ground in this podcast, far more than the reader or the listener would actually know by just listening to this podcast. We had to stretch it out and move people around to get all these logistics. Our producer, Christian Vasquez, is doing a phenomenal job piecing this whole thing together. It's just, it's like, I'm not sure what it's like trying to piece together Jell-O.
had to take a break for me to jump on the other Sports Day podcast so I could interview Mark Teixeira, which you should tune in to listen to Sports Day Rangers this week with a great interview with Mark Teixeira. Came back to this podcast, and now I can go enjoy the city. Kevin can go enjoy the sun. Christian can get out of his house so he doesn't have to do housework. It's a win-win for everybody.
Win for everybody, and Evan was even able to get a promotion for his other boondoggle of this thing. So, gosh, we did a great job on this one. This is just tremendous that we're able to do it. So, from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.